Global Television News.
Over now to the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association in Kano State is calling on the federal government to review the petroleum subsidy removal policy as continuous price fluctuations are forcing many marketers out of business. Global TV correspondent Idris Jubril reports that nearly 40% of petroleum marketers in the state have already shut down operations. The report.
At the start of his administration, President Bola Tinubu announced the removal of petroleum subsidy, a decision that immediately triggered a sharp hike in fuel prices nationwide. The ripple effect has been a persistent rise in the cost of living, driven largely by increased transportation expenses. While government maintains that the subsidy removal is intended to strengthen the nation's economy, Nigerians continue to buy fuel at highly unstable and often exorbitant prices that changes almost daily.
Many people now, they park their cars. They cannot even afford to always buy fuel and then to transport themselves. Even me, I always used to do it maybe 2 or 3 times a week.
According to independent petroleum marketers in Kano, this unpredictable price fluctuation has become their biggest challenge. Many have lost their capital to the unstable market, leaving several stations unable to continue operations. The problem of price fluctuation is mainly from the depot where we used to buy the fuel. For example, if you buy 100 naira fuel, you will be expected to include your transportation cost on the pump price. But before you even reach Kano from Lagos, you may hear that the fuel has dropped with 20 naira. They warn that unless the federal government review the subsidy removal policy, particularly by introducing a regulated minimum or maximum price, Nigerians will continue to struggle with high fuel cost, while many more marketers risk being pushed out of business. We actually need government intervention by giving us notice of increase or decrease price. Because before the start of this problem, we have people with 10 to 20 trucks, but today they have been reduced to only 1 truck. Fuel is not scarce in Kano at the moment, but there is no uniform pump price as filling stations continue to sell at different rates across the states. From Kano, Idris Jibrin, Global Television News.
Britain's centre-left Labour government is set to unveil a tax rising budget to curb debt and fund public services, while aiming to reassure financial markets and voters alike. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has vowed to reduce National Health Service waiting times and ease the prolonged cost of living crisis, hoping to straighten Labour appeal as hard right reform UK gains momentum in the polls. But Finance Minister Rachel Reeves must balance pledges to support households with convincing investors the government has its finance under control. On the foreign scene now, the Israeli military has announced a new counter-terrorism operation in the north of the occupied West Bank. The Military and Internal Security Service said in a joint statement that they began operating as part of a broad counter-terrorism operation in the area of northern Samaria, using the Israeli biblical term for part of the West Bank. In response to a question from AFP, the Israeli army said the operation was new and not part of its counter-terrorism operation launched in January 2025, which primarily targets Palestinian refugee camps. Moving on now to President Donald Trump's Africa envoy, Massad Bulus, says neither of Sudan's warring sides has accepted new ceasefire proposal, urging both to agree to the plan presented by Washington on behalf of mediators without preconditions. Bulus, senior advisor to U.S. President Donald Trump on Africa, stated that the army had introduced conditions to the humanitarian truce proposal, while the rapid support forces still need to agree to it in its exact format. Over now to Uyi Agbomofuegbe's report.
The United States envoy was in Abu Dhabi to discuss regional conflicts and the situation in Sudan, having been engaged in working with the Quad Group, comprising the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, to bring about an end to the war, The envoy also said the Sudanese army had introduced conditions to the proposal to which it had already agreed, urging them to drop all preconditions.
We have appealed and we have asked repeatedly the two parties to accept this humanitarian truce as presented without any preconditions.
The envoy also advanced a bigger issue, the humanitarian challenge occasioned by the ongoing crisis. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs had reported that since April 2023, Sudan has faced an unprecedented humanitarian crisis driven by the ongoing conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces.
And the people of Sudan can't wait any longer for humanitarian assistance to reach people everywhere in Sudan. The levels of malnutrition and suffering seen in those who are fleeing al-Fashir is unprecedented.
The Rapid Support Forces said it has declared a unilateral 3-month ceasefire a day after its rival rejected an international ceasefire proposal. Uyi Agmofwegbe, reporting for Global TV News.
Bobi Wine, the main challenger to President Yoweri Museveni's 40-year rule in Uganda, has drawn vast crowds as he brought his campaign to the capital Kampala ahead of January's election. Wine, whose real name is Robert Yalgalani, is a 43-year-old singer turned politician who has become hugely popular among Ugandan young people. He, however, faces a deeply entrenched political machine led by the 81-year-old Museveni. Zara Nasiru has the rest of the story.
Tens of thousands swarmed around Wine's motorcade as it moved around Kampala suburbs for the first time since he confirmed his second run for the presidency. Wine said he began the day at the Lozira maximum security prison just outside the city, where several officials and supporters of his National Unity platform have been held. Hundreds of heavily armed police and military personnel manned the road, which passed through the streets, despite an earlier police order to keep rallies to designated zones to avoid blocking roads. Wine has been arrested numerous times and has alleged torture in police and military custody, lost to Museveni in 2021 elections that were marred by widespread reports of irregularities and severe violence from security forces. Zahra Nasr, reporting for Global TV News.
In sports news now, the Confederation of African Football has approved a reverse squad regulation that will shape how national teams, including Nigeria, approach the 2025 African Cup of Nations. Under the new rule, team may now register up to 27 players for major tournaments. However, CAF will not only take responsibility for the expenses of 23 players covering travel, accommodation, and competition logistics, while the additional 4 players will be funded by their respective federations. CAF says the adjustments will enable coaches to better deal with injuries, suspensions, and tactical demands in what is expected to be a congested tournament calendar. Atalanta have demanded €50 million from Galatasaray to sell Ademola Lookman in January. Gazzetta dello Sport said Lazio are not willing to negotiate the fee. Galatasaray are pushing to unite Lookman with his international teammate Victor Osimhen. As Global TV News Express comes to an end, here is a recap of our top stories again. On Global TV News Express, we brought to you that President Bola Tinubu has ordered a 24-hour security cordon around forests in Kwara, Kebbi, and Niger State to link up with the boots on the ground, following a surge in kidnappings and terrorist activities. In business, a move aimed at keeping inflation in check, the Central Bank of Nigeria has held the monetary policy rate at 27%, insisting the decision will give earlier tightening measures more time to impact the economy. And on the foreign scene, the Israeli military has announced a new counter-terrorism operation in the north of the occupied West Bank. And finally, in sports, the Confederation of African Football has approved a reverse squad regulation that will shape how national teams, including Nigeria, approach the 2025 African Cup of Nations. And that's it on Global TV News Express. A quick reminder that Global TV is on DSTV channel 365 and Star Times channel 276. Kindly follow us across all social media platforms now showing on your screen by using @GlobalTVNG. I am Jumai Manson. Thank you for watching. Good afternoon.